Yeah, we back. Now I'm going to ask a question to my brothers, man. I'm going to ask a question. Where is the black man's military? Now, why do I ask that? Take a look up on the screen. You'll see a headline that reads, the U.S. military conducts first maritime drills with West African forces. Now, to give a brief summary of what the article entails, you can read it for yourself. But in summary, what it says is, the article reports that the United States military has conducted its first ever maritime drills with West African forces in the Gulf of Guinea. The exercises involve U.S. Navy ships and West African naval vessels from countries including Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, etc., etc. The drills focused on countering piracy, illegal fishing, and other maritime security threats in the region. According to the U.S. Navy officials, the exercises aim to strengthen partnerships with West African countries and improve their maritime security capabilities. The drills included training on topics such as boarding operations, search and rescue, and communication procedures. The Gulf of Guinea is a major shipping route and a hotspot for piracy and other maritime crimes. The U.S. military has been increasing its presence in the region in recent years, involving through the deployment of Navy ships and the establishment of a new Navy task force focused on Africa. The article notes that the drills come amid growing concerns about China's influence in Africa, including in the maritime sector. Some experts have warned that China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure development program, could lead to China gaining control of strategic ports in Africa and elsewhere. So, as you can see, this has nothing to do with seeing black nations becoming strong, militaristically self-sufficient. No, it's about countering Chinese influence. And not only is it about countering Chinese influence, but it's also about strengthening the influence of the United States as well as its strategic partners and allies, those who also have a history in the transatlantic slave trade, right? The French and the British, etc., the Western powers that we've come to be accustomed to and familiar with. Now, let's continue. The United States has been seeking to counter China's influence in the region through a range of initiatives, including increased military cooperation and economic partnerships with African countries. Overall, the article highlights the U.S. military's efforts to strengthen ties with West African nations and address maritime security threats in the Gulf of Guinea and broader efforts to counter Chinese influence in the continent. Now, why should every black man feel disrespected when you see a white nation being forced to step up to the plate to offer assistance, such as technology or training to West African militaries or African militaries in general? Well, number one, West African nations' kingdoms have been around long before the United States ever existed. And for those of y'all that watched that legendary video I dropped a few weeks ago entitled How to Get Paid Like Tariq Nasheed, where we spoke about various battles over the past few decades all over the continent where European forces got destroyed, got obliterated by native African forces, and in the Caribbean. We spoke about the Haitian Revolution as well. We spoke about multiple events in history, multiple battles and wars in history where the Europeans got demolished on the field of battle. So for us to now turn around and have to, come with our hand out and our hat in our hand and get assistance from the same people who we demolished on the battlefield going on decades and centuries in the past, it's embarrassing to say the least. Prior to European colonization, many African nations had militaries that were highly effective and respected, with some of the most notable examples being the Zulu, the Ashanti, the Dahomey, just to name a few. We could name the Songhai, the Kanem, the Sokoto Caliphate. Man, we could go on and on and on. Those militaries were often highly organized and disciplined, with complex command structures and specialized units, as well as sophisticated battle tactics. In addition, many African militaries were highly motivated and skilled, with soldiers who were trained from a young age and had strong cultural and religious ties to their communities. This allowed them to fight with a sense of purpose and determination, even in the face of overwhelming odds. However, with the arrival of European colonial powers in the late 19th and early 20th century, African militaries were largely dismantled or co-opted by the colonial powers. European colonial powers imposed their own military structures and systems, often with little regard for the local customs or traditions. Following independence, many African countries inherited these same colonial military structures, which were often inefficient, corrupt, and poorly equipped in particular. This, combined with decades of political instability and challenges, has resulted in many modern African militaries being weakened and ineffective. And of course, this plays into the interests of the Western powers because it gives them a further justification to continue to intervene in the political affairs of African nations. For example, just think about it. An Africa that is powerful, self-sufficient, and militaristically strong could potentially be seen as a threat to the interests of Western powers, especially if African nations were to assert their independence and pursue policies that are not aligned with Western agendas. Historically, the Western powers have often viewed Africa as a source of raw materials and a market for their goods, and have sought to maintain political and economic influence in the region for obvious reasons. They have often intervened militaristically to protect their own interests, either directly or indirectly through proxies. If African nations were to become more self-sufficient and less dependent on Western aid and investment and assistance, they could potentially become less vulnerable to outside influence and intervention, and more able to pursue their own agendas and prioritize their own needs. This could include strengthening regional economic ties, investing in infrastructure and social services, and pursuing policies that prioritize their local interests over the interests of foreign investors. Also, an Africa that is strong and militaristically capable could potentially challenge the Western dominance in the region, especially if they were to assert their own security interests and resist Western intervention. This could potentially limit Western access to resources as well as markets and undermine their economic interests in the region. Many economic interests that go back all the way to the colonial period. Also, a powerful Africa could have a positive effect on Caribbean nations as well as blacks in America because it could serve as a source of leverage for blacks around the world. Historically, Africa has played a central role in the black diaspora and has been a source of cultural and political identity for blacks around the world. A strong and self-sufficient Africa could serve as a rallying point for blacks in the Caribbean and in the Americas and inspire them to pursue their own development and self-determination. Also, if Africa was strong and self-sufficient, this could serve as a counterbalance to Western hegemony and provide leverage for blacks around the world in negotiations with the Western powers. For example, African nations could use their influence to push for more equitable trade agreements, debt relief, and greater representation in global institutions. But of course, this could only be possible if black people around the world had the intelligence and foresight to understand that we have to unite and get together and get our shit together. But unfortunately, many of us have not reached that stage of development yet in our mental, awakening. Anyways, let's continue. Something else that we got to take into account is we should be insulted by the Western powers reaching out to offer assistance because most times they're often the cause of the instability and the chaos going on in the region, and then they come back around and circle back and portray themselves as the saviors and the protectors of justice, democracy, and humanity. For example, just look at the instability going on in the Sahel region right now around Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea, etc., etc. I'm not going to put all the blame on the Western powers, but a good amount of the chaos going on right now can go back to the intervention made by the United States and France and their allies in the assassination of Gaddafi way back when. Now, I'm not no big fan of Gaddafi. It's not that channel right here. You know what I mean? I'm not no Gaddafi supporter, no Gaddafi lover, but facts is facts. The intervention by France and the United States in the Libyan conflict exacerbated the situation by arming and supporting various factions, leading to further fragmentation and instability in the region. The collapse of Gaddafi's regime led to a flood of weapons and fighters into neighboring countries like Mali, Niger, and Chad, which contributed to the rise of militant groups that are going around causing chaos right now as we speak. The instability and violence in the Sahel has had far-reaching consequences, including displacement of hundreds of thousands of people, humanitarian crisis, economic disruption, how can people do business, you know what I mean? And now the United States and France turn back around, and now they're the saviors. We're gonna offer you assistance to protect you from the bullshit that we caused, right? Listen, same old games, they keep running on the same people, man. And until we study history and look around and see the world for what it is and stop living with our head in the sand, we're gonna continue to fall victim to the same old bullshit. And going back to what I said earlier, the United States is only 200 some years old. These African nations, going back to the pre-colonial period, had kingdoms and nations that went back damn near 1,000 years. So for now to turn around and get assistance from people who just showed up on the scene a few centuries ago, it's some bullshit, man. Especially when, as black people, black nations have a long tradition of assisting each other without the assistance of Western powers. These examples include, in the early 19th century, the Kingdom of Dahomey had sent soldiers to Haiti at the request of King Henry Christophe to strengthen the Haitian armed forces, and many of those soldiers acted as Christophe's personal security detail. Also, during the regime of General Dessalines, General Juan Francisco de Miranda, a revolutionary from South America, had came to Haiti to discuss strategies for achieving independence for his own people and forging alliances against the colonial powers. And finally, when Haitian President Alexander Petron sent troops to support South American revolutionary Simon Bolivar in his fight against Spanish colonial rule. That shows you that in the past, we didn't need the Western powers to get military assistance. We could go to each other. These examples illustrate the ways in which African and black nations have been able to provide mutual support and assistance, often in the face of Western intervention and imperialism. By working together and supporting each other's struggles for independence and self-determination, these nations were able to build solidarity and resistance against colonialism and oppression. In summary, man, if we could get our shit together and get together and unite, man, we got everything we need to be a successful and prosperous people, bro. In this conversation, we discussed various topics related to Africa and its relationship with the Western powers. We talked about the role of Western intervention in creating instability in the region, the potential benefits of a powerful and self-sufficient African continent for blacks around the world. We discussed the historical strength of African militaries, as well as the current weakness of many African militaries. We talked about the potential for Africa to become a source of leverage and inspiration for blacks around the world, and the ways in which a powerful Africa could challenge Western hegemony and promote greater equity and justice in global affairs. Overall, the conversation explored a range of issues that I'm sure has crossed the mind of many intelligent black men like myself. So, brothers, you already know what it is, man. You already know what it is. We cannot continue to live like beggars, you know what I mean, with our hand out and our hat in our hand. We got to get our shit together and operate as men with dignity, power, and integrity, similar to our ancestors. Anyways, man, it is what it is. It's your boy Neferkari Desalegn back in the building. Yes, indeed. Like, share, subscribe, Cash App in the description. And I'm gone. Peace.
Reincarnated, I'm back in original fashion. I left on a horse and came back in that ass, and I left with abundance and came back to famine. We used to be pyramids, now we be rapping. Look how the mighty have fallen. Used to be running, now we be walking. When you be cooning, that's when they applauded. Selling your soul, your sons and your daughter. Gotta come up in this shit, they stuck in the mix. Really, my heart it be breaking. That's why I'm stacking that paper and handle my business. Pass it down in generation. Talking about money and power and building a nation. That's a deadly combination. Never be watching the TV, they pushing agendas, falsifying information. Know they got malice intentions. Step in the room and I'm feeling the tension. Enemy watching, he blocking my vision. Pay for the check cause I need my redemption. Building my kingdom, I need it protected. Ready for war like a young Money Congo. Never decided the team is the motto. Up in the crib and I'm whipping up waffles. Up in the crib and I'm smoking gelato. I'm chilling, I'm taking my pain and make it ambition. I'm blessed by the gods, but I ain't religious. I came for the power, they came for the bitch. They making no hourly wage, I got business. This is an art and they could never be taught. Selling my soul, I can never be bought. Play with my money, I see you ain't caught. Run to the check and I do it for sport. Babylon falling, I go to the source. Packing my luggage and go overseas. Shorty be with me and she so elite. Shorty be chocolate, I'm calling her Hershey. Secret intelligence probably gon' murk me. Don't fuck with brands cause nigga I'm Haitian. Say the wrong shit and you're smacking their faces.